welcome to the D3D4 Football Podcast with me, your host, James Richards. Yes, hello everyone, welcome back to another D3D4 Football Podcast. As you can imagine, we're here today to talk about the news that broke on Friday regarding the meeting and ending of League 2. Unfortunately, no such conclusion for League 1. We'll have our thoughts on that a little bit later in this podcast. Ed and Luke back on the pod today are joining me. Luke, how are you doing, man? We haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, I'm all good, thanks. Obviously, very, very strange circumstances, and I was kind of in another world. We'd be coming on to discuss the League 2 playoff final or the playoffs as a whole. So very, very strange, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you're working for Cheltenham in the commercial department. What's it been like as a member of staff of one of these clubs? Because I assume you are on furlough.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, at the moment, and I think that's the case across most clubs, to be honest, especially down at our level. But at the start of when this all kind of started, I was obviously still working, and there was a lot of things going on around the club. NHS fundraisers. Obviously, there was that FIFA quarantine tournament that kind of took the sort of fan base by storm. Everyone was really getting behind that. That was a nice way to pass the time at the start of all of this when the matches were called off.
Does anyone know who won that, by the way?
Wolves won it, I think, in the end.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can't remember which football league club got the furthest, but we were not.
They have to win something, don't they? You know.
Yeah, I think we were knocked out by Istanbul Başakşehir, or the Turkish team, who is the President Erdogan's team. So that was a first European tie for Cheltenham Town in that. But yeah, it was a nice bit of fun. But obviously since then things have changed, and obviously a lot of clubs are placing players and staff on furlough. But yeah, it's been okay. But obviously now we just eagerly anticipate sort of a solution, which is obviously a big step towards that with the recent decisions.
Indeed, yes. It is indeed strange times. I would echo that. I mean, I've actually been roped into doing some yoga by my wife. I mean, I know exactly. Aghast I am at the idea, but she has been badgering me to do it for ages, and it's actually been okay for my back, which is good. So yeah, I recommend it. Anyone who is adverse to trying new things, I'm majorly one of them most of the time. So, but I would recommend yoga, especially if you've got back problems like me. I'm one of these gangly, tall people who back just snaps at the slightest, even if I look at a heavy load. So I do recommend it. It's pretty good. But let's jump in, and actually let's start in League 2, because obviously the decision has been made to end the League 2 season as it stands, or not entirely end it. It appears there is playoffs still potentially on the table, but what it means is they've gone for an unweighted points per game decision, which sees Swindon, Crewe and Plymouth get promoted. I think on the whole, Ed, it's a fair reflection that of the way those teams have performed this season.
I completely agree with you on that, and there's a bit of talk about these could be potentially called the three best footballing sides in the division. There's some great footballing teams in this league, but I think when you look at the balance of the season, I think they deserved the promotion, the three of them. I believe the switch put Swindon top, not that it matters too much, I imagine, to Crewe fans, but those three getting the promotion they deserved have been fantastic. And mentioning from a Plymouth perspective, you think back to those couple of 3-0s they had in the back end of February and the start of March, and how important those have ended up being through completely unexpected circumstances.
But it just goes to show, doesn't it? Every single point you pick up across the season, no matter what part of the campaign you're in, it ends up being so important. And we all put these 6-pointers and these massive games right at the end of the season, but that result that Crewe got down at Crawley sort of early on, I mean, how important have all these points they picked up in the early doors been going into this this part of the campaign where it's all being decided by points per game? So, your thoughts, Ed, on the fact that they went for unweighted points? Because I know there is going to be some information released at some point in the next couple of days about why that decision was taken. I mean, to me, I think weighted points per game, yeah, I can see the merit of it, because obviously there has been a trend in recent seasons where teams pick up more points at home than they do away. I think it's quite a considerable gap. But also, if you want to keep it simple and very transparent, going for just a simple points per game is, I suppose, the fairest of the most, of all the unfair ways to do it, it's kind of the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, to be honest. I'm not massively keen on the idea of home advantage in truth. I think you certainly can have occasions where it works. But you take this season, for instance, I mean, you've got Salford City, who've got the 20th best home form in the division, and their away form puts them second. Yeah. So I don't believe this idea that you were always going to guarantee points at home more than away. There certainly are examples, but I'm quite glad they've gone unweighted, because I don't quite get the mass of this weight formula. I just think it's complicated stuff that doesn't really need to be done. Just use what you can.
Well, I mean, there was arguments, wasn't there? If you start bringing in weighted points per game, then why not start bringing in all sorts of other metrics to slim in advantages? Which, maybe that will give a more accurate depiction. But again, like I say, you want something that's easy for fans to comprehend and very uncomplicated, because it has to be concise. It has to be clear. If you're going to end a season, which is not, it's not ideal. There's no ideal way to end this season. Like we said last week, even if you play the matches now, teams like Colchester have already released 4 key players. So it's not really the same, is it? But so that has ended. So 3 teams got up. Luke, your side, Cheltenham, as it stands, are going to be asked to participate in the playoffs. Now, my only thoughts on this before I get your opinion is that, 1, is it safe to do so? And 2, the club will have to unfurlough all the playing staff and the people required around that to play what would I assume be a maximum of 3 matches, maybe even, is it just 2 matches? How are they doing it? Are they doing a 1-leg, 2-leg playoffs? Don't know.
I think at first it was talked about 1 leg, but I'm guessing from what they said the other day, it did seem as if they were looking at 2 legs and then a final, just like it would be as normality, I think.
So how does this sit with you as a Cheltenham fan? Because obviously, if they didn't do it that way, Cheltenham would probably go up, but playoffs obviously don't make it quite so clear cut for you.
Yeah, at the moment there are more important things than football, but it would be that the one kind of big change in League Two, if it was on PPG, would be the fact that Cheltenham leapfrog Exeter into 4th. And go up, and obviously from a supporter's perspective and a staff's perspective, it would be amazing. It would cap off a fantastic season for the club. Really, not expected to be anywhere near the picture, but the way the club has gone forward in the last sort of the last year has been, and even before that has been fantastic, and it really would be brilliant to see. However, that there's got to be a lot of questions to be asked. I think we all want football to return. As the Bundesliga did yesterday. But the situation is very different in Germany than it is in England. I think that it was the right decision for most of League Two clubs. Obviously, there was a few exceptions to vote against resuming the season, because I think that is the right thing to do at the moment. That it just isn't possible for League Two clubs to do that, I think, and certainly clubs at sort of lower level. Financially, resuming the season with no fans is virtually impossible, I think, for some of these clubs, because the income completely stops.
There was also talk of the testing needing to be in place across clubs around 200,000 to finish the games that they needed to, if you could finish the league campaign.
100%, and that is of course a big thing as well. I think. When you look at the fact that there's a lot of financial cost, the fact that the decision to not resume the season now and finish the regular season is the right decision. But for me, kind of resuming the playoffs and having the playoffs to take place kind of doesn't make sense to me, because, as you say, most staff, including players, would have to be unfurloughed at playoff clubs. It hasn't been confirmed, but there has been talk of the fact that these clubs would then still have to pay kind of the bills for this. Of course, there's got to be measures of PPE for it. They've got to pay the wages. They've got no income through supporters coming through the gates, which is everything to clubs at League Two level.
Could they not charge a ticket price, so the same as a ticket price for fans to watch online? Because, I mean, you could potentially make money that way and also get a bit more, because you might have some neutral fans wanting a football fix and just taking up a general ticket.
I think that was the talk with iFollow if the season was going to resume. But I think the playoffs are still going to be on TV, so there would be a tiny bit of money coming through from obviously TV revenue from that, which is great. But I don't think they'd be charging people if it's going to be sort of free to air on Sky Sports, etc. I wonder if that would affect a lot of people sort of watching it on iFollow or it being streamed. But at the same time, there's still many clubs, including Cheltenham, obviously it's a very tight squeeze at the moment financially, isn't it? So any sort of risk financially, they're kind of having to take on more of a financial risk than any other club in League Two, the four teams in the playoffs, by competing in the playoffs. And if you look at the fact that also other teams like Colchester and teams across the division have started to release players, why should, even though their contracts aren't actually expiring until next month really, why should those players go ahead and play if they potentially are, when they could risk their bodies and also risk their health when they're being released straight after that? So you've got that as well. There's also the case that is a very low risk. I've seen studies come out that players could sort of contract the virus from playing, but we're kind of in that situation now in England where we're certainly not out of lockdown, and we're certainly not out of sort of the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment with coronavirus. So I just don't think that the risk, and a lot of our players have already kind of come forward. Captain Ben Tozer has kind of asked questions. Well, I think 3 of our players have got babies coming in the next 4 weeks, so their situation is going to be quite difficult because they've got to kind of make a decision whether they play. Because obviously they've got families to think of, and of course families come before sort of football at this time. So I'm not entirely sure that the playoffs is the best kind of route at the moment. That being said, there's no football or any sport in the UK until at least June the 1st. So obviously it would take place in sort of, I would imagine, later next month. But with that in mind, we still don't know. The situation is unclear. So I'm not entirely sure playing at all is the right sort of situation. Whether that means PPG means that the 4th team go up, and that is Cheltenham, potentially. Even if there is no promotion for the playoff clubs, if they believe that if they're not going to take the playoffs, it's not fair to promote another club, that's fine by me. I know other people have different opinions, because I just don't think resuming play at this moment in time is the right thing to do.
Well, before I bring Ed in on this, I would just say as well, one thing that I've noticed all the way through this crisis, whether it be from a financial viewpoint, whether it be from a health viewpoint, football players are being put in a very difficult situation, and I think quite an unfair situation, actually. We're asking them, we had politicians asking them to pay some of their wages or take wage cuts when other big paying industry executives weren't being put on under the same pressure. We've got them being asked to go back and play on a pitch and take risks for them and their families, which we're not asking members of the general public to do either. And again, yes, footballers generally are paid well, and it's part of the job, you could say, to go out and play and entertain people. Actually, in a global pandemic, it's just another job, and they're just another human being who has to make the same sort of prioritised decisions based on health and their family. So again, I do have my reservations about football returning unless it is completely safe to do so. And again, for League Two clubs, with testing costs and stuff like that, it doesn't seem to me to be particularly practicable. Ed, what were you wanting to bring into this debate?
Right. From a football fan's perspective, I would love to see the playoffs, obviously, because looking at these 4, you're looking at it'd be Cheltenham, Northampton, and Colchester v Exeter. That's really difficult to call, I think. Having watched these guys this season, that'll be a very interesting playoff race. Luke, you make excellent points about it, and I completely agree with you. And I do think if they did say we're definitely doing this, it would probably not be till at least the end of June that they were able to do it, given the situation in the UK at the moment. And that just feels like a waste of time if you're going to wait that long. I don't know. Your point about the 4th promotion side, possibly. I know Exeter fans would feel that's quite bitter taste in the mouth, considering what's happened, and Exeter hit a bad run of form at the worst possible time, really, which they weren't expecting, obviously.
Well, you've also got teams like Port Vale who aren't going to be part of the playoffs yet. They're right on the cusp.
Port Vale deserve so much praise for how they've handled this. Yeah. The humbleness of the owners, which we'll no doubt talk about, how that they've decided, even in the situation they're in, where they're 1 point away from Northampton and Colchester, they've said, you know what, let's end the season, let's put other clubs before ourselves. They've had a brilliant season anyway. I don't think any of us saw them being this close, high up in the table, and they've really made me proud, and I think the future under them is going to be so good.
Yeah, and I did say on Twitter as well that the Exeter chairman put out a comment. He put out a statement, and it was full of pragmatic and selfless opinion, to be honest. He was saying, let's put football first. Let's put the wider health of the community and the people of this country before the sort of selfish self-interest pap that we're seeing from other clubs. And fair play, I take my hat off to him. I mean, absolutely commendable, because his club are one that, based on this system, kind of lose out. And yet he's taking it on the chin, and he's taking it in a way that is very, I think, genial. And I think it's nice to see. I think it's nice to see people being like that, because like Luke said earlier, there's far more important things going on than football. Let's get on to the other subject that the end of League Two brings up, and that is clubs saying that they do not want relegation. EFL definitely want it. In fact, the EFL, according to Matt Slater, are prioritising having relegation and promotion. The Championship and League One clubs want to see a relegation from League Two. And my argument for this is simple. I have no vested interest in seeing Stevenage go down at all. So this is not any bias in this. But what I would say is, if points per game is good enough to see a side promoted, then it must be good enough to relegate a side. You've got to have one rule that is the same for everyone. You can't say, we'll promote these clubs or we won't relegate these teams. Or you can't say, we'll promote this club but not this one. You can't do that. You have to have a blanket situation. And this is something that will come onto League One as well. If we're doing this for League Two, if we're promoting sides, even though the season hasn't actually finished and there are plenty of points still to play for, if we're promoting sides based on this points per game table, then you have to relegate them. It's as simple as that. Because if you're Barrow, or a team who've worked all season in the National League to get into the playoffs, then it's kind of a very difficult and bitter pill to swallow for them if they have to see teams going up in the division above them but not coming down. But I'll come to you first on this, Ed. What's your take on relegation? Should there be or should there not be?
I completely agree with your point. The issue is, if this had all happened a month ago and Stevenage were the gap they were, you'd be saying 100% they should be going. But the problem is, because of what's happened at Macclesfield, they're actually 3 points behind Macclesfield with a game in hand. So there's the argument now that if the season had been allowed to play out, they could have caught them. And that's where that's people's argument towards it. But I completely agree with you. I don't understand why we're sending teams up and not sending teams down. We're just going to create odd-numbered league next year's, and we've already started complaining about the number of fixtures in a season. Yeah. So let's just go take leagues even bigger. I don't get the logic. I don't
just promote everyone. Yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
We'll
I don't get it.
92 Premier League next season. I just find it silly. I mean, like I say, Stevenage, they've had the way they perform. They can't really have any complaints if they do go down, because it's not as if there are clubs who have been within touching distance all season. They've been by far the worst team. I mean, Barrow, if you don't relegate someone, I assume Barrow will be elected to come up straight away to replace Bury.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the common sense decision, wouldn't it? I mean,
yes.
However, this is the EFL, so it would surprise me as they...
Well, the National League are basically they're twiddling their thumbs at the minute because they're waiting for the EFL to decide. So if the EFL suddenly decides there's no relegation, the National League is going to think, right, what we're doing here, are we sending one up or can we not? There's just still not enough communication between
Well, if there's no relegation as well, the National League, how annoyed would they be that they've just been forced to wait this long?
Yeah, exactly.
Left in limbo, so to speak. But, I can see Stevenage's argument as well. I mean, they are, like you say, 3 points behind Macclesfield. Though that's a technicality. That's due to Macclesfield's off-the-field issues rather than on it. I mean, there is a case where you should say Macclesfields are becoming a little bit of a club where the owner is questioning the integrity of the league, really. Cancelling fixtures, not paying players. You could argue that Macclesfield should be relegated based on the fact that they're not a club that are currently running in the way that is I suppose it's the rules of the game. I mean, they are not being unfair to them, but they're a bit of an embarrassment at the moment. And that's no fault to the fans or the players. It's down to the owner. But, for clubs who are running themselves properly, I can see it being quite galling that this guy's allowed to get away with it without any serious consequence.
There's a few owners in League Two I'd put that point towards as well.
It's rather...
It's sad. It's really sad to see. Really sad to see.
I'd like to see football realign slightly after this, where clubs who run themselves properly somehow come out of this better than those that haven't. It may be that that's the case anyway due to the pressures financially that will be on those clubs that are really not being run well, but something tells me it won't be. So we'd better move on to League One. And if you're not familiar, League One are still discussing the issues of how they'll end their season. If you weren't aware, I think it was Thursday night that Darren McAntony tweeted out, breaking news. I have been asked on behalf of, now let me get this right. So it was Oxford, Peterborough, Sunderland, Portsmouth, Fleetwood. Was it another team in there as well?
Ipswich was the other one.
And Ipswich, to say that we want to continue the season and we look forward to doing so as soon as it's safe. Something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, utter tripe, if you ask me. I mean, it's just, League Two has been cancelled because financially it's not safe. It's not practical to continue, and it's not really safe to continue at the moment as it is. It may not even be safe to resume the playoffs. There is talk that League One will have playoffs, but they won't play any more league games. There is talk as well that the clubs don't want to get relegated. I mean, there's all these permutations, but what it is that annoys me about this whole thing is it's been the sort of tiresome self-interest that has been governing each club, rather than there being any sort of ability for clubs to do what's right and what's better for the game itself. And I do get Darren McAntony's point of view. He's put a lot of money into this season. He's in a favourable position which could see his side get promoted to the Championship, where there's a massive financial windfall at the end of that. But we are in this global pandemic. There are potentially 50,000 people have died because of this. This is something that's hugely serious, and this sort of wrangling and discord, which we haven't seen in League Two. You could have argued that their clubs in League Two could have gone along the same lines, but we haven't seen that. And it's just not great to see, Ed. And I know you have strong opinions on this.
I do. I don't get. I think Darren McAntony's wasting his time, to be honest, with all this argument. What League One is at the minute is a hung parliament. There's a clear majority decision per third, but it's not clear enough ahead for it to go through. And you could imagine those six are just going to stay stubborn for the next few weeks. And there's going to be a point where someone's going to have to intervene and say, you know what, if you can't make your mind up, we're going to make our mind up for you. And then no one's going to get what they want. And it's just, I don't understand why people are complaining. This is not the EFL's fault. This is the fault of no other club in the country. We're dealing with something that's completely outside of football. Like, you can't, we're not going to finish the proper season. There's always going to be an asterisk next to the 1920 season name because it didn't properly finish. And I think people are just going to have to accept that.
Yeah.
We could see, and this is not an unlikely scenario, we could actually see the next season resume, get onto some sort of normal start. Obviously, I don't think we'll see fans in games or full stadiums for quite some time. But we could then see, they're all talking about a raise in the R and a peak that could happen in winter. We could see lockdown return. We could see all of this return and be stuck in another sort of limbo next season, which would be awful for clubs financially. I mean, we may not see all the clubs survive as it is right now. So, and my other point about this is if League Two are doing one thing, why should League One do anything different? You have to have continuity. I mean, it wrangles me, even though I understand the arguments for the Championship because of the clubs more financially able to continue playing. Whether it's safe to do so, again, as we've spoken about, it seems at this moment in time a little bit unsure, a bit ludicrous in my mind. But if you're doing it for League Two, you've got to do it for League One. And I'm an Oxford fan, and so if it's not weighted points per game, which sees Wycombe go third, and I have no problem with Wycombe being promoted as that third team if that's the way to do it. If you can't do the playoffs, it's just not a normal situation. But what's your thoughts on this, Luke? What do you make of the debacle in League One as it stands?
Well, I haven't listened to both of you. I completely agree with both of you and your points on it, and especially there, James, it has to be consistent. The EFL have to, across all their divisions, I think, have to be absolutely, the same for each division. When that comes to promotion to relegation. And again, like you said, if it's coming to loggerheads at the moment with those six clubs and the rest of the league trying to decide whether to play on, League Two have already finished their season. So now, instantly, if we're talking of consistency and making things the same, really it's inevitable, despite the fact that these six clubs are kind of hanging on to the fact they want to play on, surely we're going to end up going down the route where they too finish the season in League One. I know it's not sort of set in stone, but it looks as if that would probably be the way eventually. It just takes a little longer to get there because those clubs are kind of saying they don't want to do it, those 6 clubs. And then again, potentially look towards playing the playoffs in League One like they are in League Two behind closed doors, which I've already explained my opinion on that. But if that's the way that the EFL want to go down and they're going to do it, then that's the way they're going to do it. All I want to see is consistency, like you've argued back to the hill, is that it's got to be done the same across both divisions. So
well, the Championship will be watching this very closely, because if it health-wise it doesn't become practical to finish the season, then they will be ended in the same way as League 1 and 2. They will be, which if it's points per game sees Leeds and West Brom go up automatically. Yeah. Fulham would be the 3rd team. Brentford are desperate, obviously, to resume playing the season, or at least have the playoffs, because they would be ending 4th.
The financial difference. Sorry, go on, Ed.
I was just saying the Championship is the easy one to sort out, because there's all this talk about people playing odd numbers of games. Everyone's played 37 in the Championship.
Yeah.
So you could just simply end it there, even though you've still got games to play, but everyone's played the same. Whereas with these ones, and in the Premier League as well, you've got that argument of this team's got a game in hand and that could change the shape of the table. But the Championship's probably got the easiest option to go with PPG, and I don't really get why they don't go with it.
No, I think it's more the fact that there's some clubs and threat of legal action, because the financial gain of getting into the Premier League is massive, isn't it?
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's the biggest game in football, isn't it? Really, that especially when it comes to the playoff final in the Championship, getting to the Premiership, the money is on an astronomically different level, and I think that's probably why Championship clubs are really going to fight to the fact that they want to finish this season.
I don't get what you can take legal action against, though. This isn't the EFL's fault. Yeah. What are you going to do?
And what would legal action do? Because you're not
exactly. I don't get what your case is against.
They want compensation, I think, is what it is. They want financial. Yeah, I think they'll go for financial compensation against potential earnings. Again, I think it's disgusting. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that I know you're putting a lot of money into doing this, but this is, like you say, it's no one's fault. This is not something that has happened because of an actions of a single club or a single governing body. This is something that is completely unprecedented in 2 generations. Not since, was it 1908 we had the Spanish flu? We haven't seen anything of this scale at all. I mean, as it stands, the thing with Darren McAntony, I mean, even if points per game are used and they go just for playoffs, his team Posh finish outside the playoff places. Hence why he is desperate to make sure the season is finished. But it does annoy me. I've seen he's been making comments, and Joey Barton making some comments which I felt were unjust towards people like Troy Deeney, who have been saying I'm not comfortable with playing unless it's 100% safe, because he's got a young family to think of. Being from an ethnic minority, there is evidence that suggests that he is more at risk, and his family could be more at risk of coronavirus than, say, just a Caucasian male, for example. So there are other things to consider here, and yet he's getting snide remarks about how if he doesn't want to play, he can sit on the bench and young players will get their opportunity. I just think he is making a valid point. He's putting a personal opinion across, which is completely valid, about the health concerns. And like I said earlier, why are we asking players to take health risks which we wouldn't be willing to take ourselves or ask other people to take? Don't know. But as it stands at the bottom, I mean, I can see Tranmere being a bit upset about this, but you can't really say Bolton or Southend have any complaints of being relegated. And they essentially would go down. You'd have 4 go up to realign the numbers in League One for next season, and then obviously the relegation idea is still to be decided. We'd have Charlton, Luton, and Barnsley all coming back down after they went up the previous season, which just shows you how difficult it is to play Championship football if you've been in League One. So, would you really want to go into the Championship? That's the thing.
Well, I think a lot of Wycombe fans are a bit on edge about it. I've seen, especially if they do go with this unweighted PPG, which would obviously put Wycombe 3rd and send them up. There's the kind of idea of, do you really want to go into the Championship in this kind of moment? Well, I don't know. That's something to ask. That's something to talk to Wycombe fans about.
Well, I think we should. Let's get the debate going on Twitter. Let's get your opinions on what we've been talking about in this podcast. It's very difficult to remove self-interest and heart and sleeve stuff from football. It's an emotional game. We all want to see what's best for our clubs. But as an Oxford fan, and just stepping away from being a fan for a moment, I just want to see what's best for football done here, because I don't want to be looking at a regionalised League 1 and 2. I really don't want to see that. I don't want to see a League 1 and 2 which is broken away. So we have the Premier League 1 and 2. I think that would be bad for football. It'd be, you'll never get that sort of valid and vital system of the pyramid that we have back again. I don't want to see clubs disappear or go under because every club is vital to their local community. So there's much more at stake here than just a single season and campaign. I get it. Promotion to the Premier League could change the future of a club forever. But like I said, this is a global pandemic and there are bigger things at play here. Any last comments or anything that you don't think we've covered here, Ed or Luke?
I personally, just one more thing from me is I know it's hard to kind of ask to say, right, you need to sort of give money, but when you look at the sort of the money and in the Premier League and sort of the financial situation there, it would be a mere drop in the ocean for them to support EFL and certainly sort of the EFL clubs and to try and sort of get things back on track. So I would say if eventually when it comes to it, there's going to be massive changes. There could potentially be massive changes in football. Clubs could be going out of business. Now, Macclesfield is a different kind of situation because they were already in sort of limbo with the owners, etc. But other clubs will find it very difficult to sort of get back on track until supporters come back through the gates. So I do wonder if there needs to be some financial support from the Premier League to the EFL. And I think it was talked about, it is a mere drop in the ocean, really. But of course, there's questions, why should they? Well, why should they? It's sort of supporting the grassroots of the game that the EFL kind of feeds the Premier League in a way as well. So that's just the one thing I wanted to kind of put in, that at some point are we going to have to look at sort of financial support for a lot of sort of Football League clubs if we can't see supporters back in stadiums to potentially 2021.
Even if they're allowed back, how many people do you think would return? Because you could still have a certain group of fans being on the vulnerable list, maybe under shielding rules they wouldn't be allowed to return. You might have people who just don't feel it's safe enough, or those that live with people of a vulnerable nature. It could be that clubs might have to get used to hugely different circumstances and different attendances, lower attendances going forward. Again, though, at least, there must be a way, I think, for a season or so that you allow fans to watch from home at the same price as a match day ticket. So no more of these £10 to watch on iFollow. I think if a fan can't get to the game because of health reasons, you should give them that option to watch it online for the same price.
Yeah, I agree.
There has to be, just for a season, just until this is over, because obviously at the moment attendances are a big thing. We don't want to detract from that on a long-term scale where we have people not going because it's easier to watch at home. But in a circumstance where health is involved and there's a valid reason for it, then maybe that's an option that they could look at. Especially in League 1 and 2 where you don't have the sort of the TV matches that that could conflict with viewing numbers for Sky or something. It's a case of just getting as much money for clubs and being a little bit more flexible and thinking outside the box a bit of how you can try and get more cash into the coffers. I don't know. Lot to chew on. When are we expecting, Ed, a decision, do you think, on League 1?
League 1? Probably about 2 years from now. No, stubborn now.
Once the lawsuits have all stopped.
Honestly, I think you're not going to get an answer. You're going to get an answer from the EFL who are just going to intervene and say, you guys can't make your mind up. We're going to follow with League 2 and you're going to have to deal with it. I just think I can't see those 6 changing their minds. I think they're going to be stubborn with it. So this will probably drag on for another month, which is just going to really mess everybody up.
Yeah, indeed. And one caveat I would say, it's not, League 2 it's been voted by the clubs, but it's not yet ratified. I think it has to get a vote from all the member clubs in the EFL, which needs about a 50+ majority, which looks like it's doable. I don't see why people wouldn't vote for League 2 to end that way. But if you're looking at self-interest, a lot of clubs may not want to vote or may abstain from voting because they don't want to see that applied to their division. So there's still not yet all confirmed about the end of League 2, but it has been voted for by clubs at that level. It was a unanimous as well. And well done League 2 chairman and owners and fans for generally taking it in the way that it should be. I think that is very admirable. And it does, I think these crises, you guys may not agree, but I think these crises do tend to highlight the good eggs from the bad.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this. There's loads to sort of pick through. We may have missed something. If we have, let us know. But overall, I'd love to get your opinions, because every fan will have an opinion on this. You're all going to be supporting different clubs. Some of you, it may not make any difference to your season whatsoever. Shrewsbury fans, I listen to their podcast. A lot of the Shrewsbury fans are like, I don't care if it ends now, frankly. I wouldn't even go back and watch it even if it did. So, you've got those sort of fans, but then you have got fans of clubs that would miss out. You've got fans of clubs that may stand to benefit. So let's get your opinions on this. Reply beneath our podcast if you do have an opinion, and let's get a bit of a debate going. Ed, as always though, mate, thank you very much for coming on and giving me your thoughts today.
Pleasure as always.
Lukey Dookie, great to have you back on, mate.
Thank you very much. Great to talk about it and catch up.
I have to get you back on again in the near future. And let's just hope that this mess is sorted. Let's get a conclusion. And let's hope that football at some point in the future does return to a semblance of normality. But wherever you are, guys, hope you're safe. Thank you for listening and take care.